Hi, everybody. Welcome inside YSN headquarters inside the G. Burbick Farm Studios. DJ Oakley with you here for the One Pop press conference, and I am joined by my good friend, Mr. Scotty Mincher, his first time on a podcast. Scotty, tell everybody about yourself and why you love sports so much.
Well, DJ, I'd be happy to, and I'm very excited to be on this One Pop press conference today. And I just want to say that I grew up in Camel, Ohio, originally from Camel.
Soup City.
Yeah, so in the city of churches, although I think many of them have closed down now. But DJ, I think my passion for sports and the reason why, a big reason why I love sports so much, I have to give a lot of credit there to my father. My dad was a huge sports fan, and I guess ever since I was a kid, DJ, like even if I couldn't do exactly everything that everyone else was doing, and as far as playing team sports, we would always, in ways I would try to work around it. And we would play, like baseball games in the backyard. I would be able to hit, somebody would, run for me, things like that. And I always was fascinated with watching games and the commentators too there. So I think Michael Jordan had a lot to do with it. I've always been a diehard Cavs fan, but Jordan, when I was growing up and a little kid, I couldn't take my eyes off him. He was so engrossing too. I just always enjoyed it, and love Sports Center too, the old throwback Sports Centers with Stuart Scott and Kenny Mayne,
Dan Patrick,
and all those guys.
Yeah, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with Scotty, he does so much here at YSN from the standpoint of you do 60 Seconds with Scotty, you do Scotty Stories, now you're doing a podcast. A lot of the people that, at some point said that you wouldn't be able to do some of this stuff, you're proving them wrong on an every week basis now, buddy.
Well, it's something that I think as I've gotten older, I've had to adapt and constantly figure out a way to, overcome, kind of beat the odds. And I think the older I get, DJ, they say the old saying, older, wiser, but I feel like the older I've gotten, the more confident I've become. Like, yeah, everybody has hardships and roadblocks in life, but I just feel like this is just a tremendous country here, and even with the certain roadblocks and things I've had to overcome, in many ways, it just has made me the person I am today. So if it wasn't for those hard times, I don't think I'd be as effective at what I've been able to do, and trying to help you out to the best my ability. And far from, nobody is ever a finished product.
Right.
You could learn something new every single day, but I think the hardships, DJ, has just made me focus on, I think I used to always focus on, okay, how can I improve my weaknesses? But now I'm just focusing more on, what I'm good at, and not dwelling so much on the weaknesses. I think that's important, DJ.
I think you're killing it, man, and I think it's exciting for everybody out there to be able to see what you're able to do from your standpoint, because you just keep breaking down barriers and walls, as you've kind of discussed in some of your stories. And your stories are so excellent because it's all from your point of view, and we love that. You don't pull any punches necessarily. You kind of tell people the way it is, and that's kind of what we're looking at. Doing this 1 hour podcast each week. We want to have you give your vision on the world and your kind of perspective. That's why I'm excited to do it. And you've got some great topics today that you wanted to discuss. Can you give us kind of an indication of what those are going to be?
Yeah, I can. Three that immediately came to mind, DJ, because there's just plenty to talk about right now. Typically around this time of year, you still obviously you got the conference championship games in the NFL, but this is like around the time, especially once the Super Bowl is concluded, there's kind of a
that lull.
Yep. There, DJ. But I feel like, especially with what's gone on in baseball and the moves the Browns have made once again, I feel like there's, even if you're not a Browns fan, there's a lot of intriguing stuff to talk about there. But the three things I really thought would be good to discuss today were the Astros, the cheating scandal, and the penalties they got hit with by Major League Baseball.
Yep. Also,
the conference championship games. It is championship week in the NFL. And then because I'm writing my next story and I'm focusing on analytics and sabermetrics, I just wanted to get your thoughts on what the Browns are doing again and how effective you think that analytics is in sports today.
Well, let's start with that one. I mean, that seems like a good place to start, especially given the circumstances in Cleveland. They've got a new head football coach. You're a Browns fan. I am not. I like watching the dumpster fire, and you are living it. Stefanski's selected as coach over McDaniels, over a laundry list of coaches. To me, Scotty, at the end of the day, I think Cleveland wanted Mike McCarthy. They just were too slow to pull the trigger on him. Dallas was able to jump in there, and obviously that's a little bit better of a destination for him as a coach because you're not exactly building the plane in mid-flight as the Browns are right now, and there's less fires to put out inside that organization. But I don't think that Stefanski is going to, no pun intended, catch the world on fire. I don't think he's the guy that is going to put the Browns where they want to be or where their fans want them to be. Your thoughts?
I would have to agree with you, DJ, in a lot of ways. I think from a talent perspective, both if you just look at it on paper, and as we know, sometimes it's great, sometimes it isn't, depending on your viewpoint that games aren't played on paper. But if you just look at Dallas and the Browns, very similar as far as on paper, a lot of talent that just didn't really mesh and come together. But the Browns have a little bit more personality there. I think Baker Mayfield, he's a lot more like brash and outspoken than somebody like Dak Prescott is there. And you have Odell Beckham, you have Jarvis Landry. These are guys that very passionate players. That they want to win, so that's good. I think they're driven. But also when adversity hits, sometimes they could be a little bit tough to deal with. And you've said it before, DJ. I remember we talked and you would say that, so many receivers you feel like are prima donnas.
Absolutely.
in the NFL. So I think, DJ, what they did, I think the best way I could put it with Freddie Kitchens after this last year, it's like they gave him the keys to a Ferrari and he was an 18-year-old and just in over his head, and he totally wrecked that Ferrari. they say Stefanski is a leader of men, but I still have some serious doubts, DJ, because you look at Josh McDaniels, his resume as a coordinator was a lot better. Yes, he had Tom Brady, who many consider the GOAT now, as far as quarterbacks go. But Stefanski only did it for 1 year. He was only the offensive coordinator 1 year in Minnesota. So in many ways, it's kind of like they're hiring Freddie Kitchens all over again. At least McDaniels, he's been around, a guy who's, again, the greatest, not only arguably the greatest quarterback, but the greatest head coach of all time, and Bill Belichick, and he had the head coaching experience in Denver. So of the candidates that were left, I thought McDaniels was the most qualified, but I want to say too that I thought that you mentioned Mike McCarthy. I thought they really missed there. I thought when they interviewed him first, they should have locked the doors and hired him, DJ. I also was a big Ron Rivera fan. But the Browns, they didn't really get the ball rolling there. I think they waited too long, and he was already interviewing with Washington, and they were sorting out, who was going to take front office positions after the firing of Freddie. So I just feel like this Stefanski thing, that there's some upside, but there's a lot more risk there.
Yeah, I think the risk reward is there for Stefanski. Like you said, only a 1-year offensive coordinator, but the quarterbacks that he's worked with, and I think I heard it on the radio broadcast you were listening to before we started. You've got high praise from Brett Favre. I mean, that's a Hall of Fame quarterback that thinks a lot of this new head coach for Cleveland Browns. Obviously, Kirk Cousins thinks very highly of his offensive coordinator. But you've got, a mix of quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater and things of that have worked with this coach before. Are the Browns hiring another head coach just for Baker Mayfield? And, you talk about this analytics scenario that the Browns are looking at. And I posted something on social media earlier this week that this whole hiring process reminds me of when Michael Scott left Sabre and Dunder Mifflin on the show The Office, because they marched in all these great candidates, and they ended up going with the one that made people scratch their heads the most, which was a guy named Robert California. And it's one of those scenarios where during one of the interviews, Scotty, they actually asked somebody how they would go about succeeding at Dunder Mifflin, and he had a 3-part plan, but he would only give them part 1 of part 3 of the plan because he didn't want to show the cards. This whole analytics thing, this tells me exactly the Cleveland Browns are Dunder Mifflin. That is exactly what they're a paper company that is literally tripping over themselves to try to keep up with the Joneses, which is now Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and unfortunately, little brother down in Cincinnati as well, especially if they get Joe Burrow here in a couple months.
Yeah, and I feel, DJ, and if you would like to give your thoughts on this, I'm curious what you think as well. I feel you look at them deciding to fire General Manager John Dorsey. I feel like Dorsey made his share of mistakes during his time in Cleveland. His biggest one, and the book is still out, but the biggest one, I think, is the hiring of Freddie, first off. Second there, it's got to be right now, because the jury is still out, it's got to be the selection of Baker. If he's not a franchise guy, that falls on John Dorsey, and that would be a huge fail. But you look at the the season Jarvis Landry had. He had another statistically a great year, and he was much more productive and consistent than their big time free agent acquisition, Odell Beckham Jr. He was just much more productive this year. Maybe it had to do with the attention that Odell commands, but anyway, the point being is I feel like John Dorsey brought a lot of talented players here. And yes, I think he overlooked some character issues, because I think he's a guy that looks at the talent and he's like, okay, this guy's really talented, so I'm going to bring him in here and we'll fix this guy, work on his character issues. I thought Dorsey made some mistakes, but I think it was a bigger mistake, the Browns letting him go, because he was a traditional football guy, had some longtime traditional football guys in the front office, and I just think it's going to hurt their drafting. You look at Nick Chubb, he went a few selections after Bill Belichick took Sonny Michel. You think Bill Belichick wants that pick back?
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm still very sour over the Browns getting rid of Dorsey. I've heard he's kind of like an egomaniac and hard to work with, but it just always seems like the Browns, even when things are going decent, and it looks like they could be building something, the second one thing goes wrong, they just want to throw a grenade and everything and totally blow it up. So what are your thoughts? I mean, I know you're happy that the Browns are so dysfunctional because you're a big-time Steelers fan, but were you surprised they fired Dorsey too?
I was, and here's why. I thought Dorsey was the biggest foundational block in the Browns turning things around. Even over the last 2 years, I mean, you under Hugh Jackson, you're 1-31, something like that, and then you make a little bit of a play. You start making waves. 2 years ago now, and then this year you beat the Steelers, and we all know how ugly that game ended. But that was the turning point for me. That was the turning point where you really kind of cut the locker room in half. It was a divided locker room. People were okay with Freddie at that point, and then all of a sudden, Freddie's got to be able to hold his players accountable. He's a player's coach. And all the things that you heard about Mike Tomlin years and years ago. Now we're blatant holes for Freddie Kitchen, and the finger pointing began. I explained this on social media the other day to a person who told me that Baker Mayfield was the second best quarterback in the AFC North, which I firmly believe he is the worst, or will be the worst, in next year whenever Joe Burrow is in the NFL and playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. Baker Mayfield had an opportunity with a playbook basically designed around him passing the football. It's every quarterback's dream. And he's got two receivers that are all pro. And he's got a tight end who should be all pro. And you've got the second best running back in the league. And outside of an unbelievable game by Derrick Henry, you've got the first best running back in the league. And you still disappoint your team. So when I look at this from a Steelers perspective, I say, okay, they've got everything going for him. This quarterback has every opportunity to succeed, and Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph were on par with him the rest of the way, the entire way. That is our second and third string quarterback as the Steelers. All I heard all offseason was about Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield. He's going to have this unbelievable year, all-pro, Pro Bowl, possible MVP candidate. And he did absolutely nothing. He pooped the bed as far as Browns fans are concerned. And, at some point, yes, the coach is going to be held accountable because he's not getting paid the millions and millions and millions of dollars that quarterbacks are. And the Browns still believe that Baker's the franchise. I think that he needs to stop doing commercials and start studying the playbook and know where his receivers are. But I also believe that if the Browns are believing in this analytical side of things, where they're going to have the plays turned in on Friday to be analyzed for Sunday's game, that's all well and good until you have to make adjustments. What do you do at halftime? Are these accountants going to come down and with their briefcases and start taking the playbook away from Coach Stefanski and Baker Mayfield and discuss why things work on Tecmo Super Bowl or why it works so well on Madden 2021 and put it in a computer like Moneyball? That's not football. In football, there is so many things that have to work simultaneously in an orchestra of events for it to go right. I mean, think about if you have a 79-yard pass touchdown, but there's a flag on the play. And now all of a sudden you go from scoring 6 to the next play you throw a pick 6. That's a 12-point swing. And the numbers, the analytics that the Browns are looking for do not put that into kind of what the expectations are. And that's my major problem. If you want to do Moneyball in baseball and you want to go off of sabermetrics and analytics and things of that nature, fantastic. Baseball is typically a one-on-one matchup between a pitcher and a batter. And as a baseball player, the statistics are if you pitch him away, he's going to hit it as a right-handed hitter. He's going to hit it to the right side. If you pitch him inside, chances are he's going to pull the baseball or right up the middle. Football, you have to evaluate not only the 11 on your side, but the 11 on the other side. So think about how much goes into that. Can you do that in a 48-hour time frame and still be able to put together a good playbook? I don't think so. I don't think analytics is the way.
And I would agree with you there, and I think to make the point you made even stronger, DJ. I think my opinion on it, even if you look at baseball in the Oakland A's, and yes, they've been successful. They've gotten to the playoffs, won some wild cards, won some division titles. They had the 20-game winning streak that Moneyball season before the Indians broke that streak in 2017. But they never won a World Series with it made for a good movie, but they never won the World Series, and that's a sport where I think analytics are more effective is baseball. Football, I just feel like you got to go by what you see on film, and I also think, DJ, that you could crunch down all the numbers you want and say, we're going to pick this guy because look at these great numbers, but it doesn't show you somebody's heart that they have. So that's another thing there.
How about just draft good football players?
Yeah,
that's the thing. Just put football players on the field and let their talents excel.
Yeah, that's what I say. Look at the best player on the board. I mean, get to know the guy. I think the Browns seriously need to consider. I think once you reach a certain point, sometimes always taking the most talented guy, if they do have some character issues, I think sometimes, you're taking a gamble there. But how much are you going to know about these guys from a couple of interviews? I mean, sometimes they're not going to let everything out of the bag. If, teams knew that Antonio Brown,
was a head case,
they wouldn't, he would be a guy that maybe he would have got a chance, but I think it's one of those things where if they knew he was, such a head case, he wouldn't have had his time to be on the biggest stage and shine as the number one I thought he was the best receiver in
Hands down.
football, hands down. So
And I think the other thing, Scotty, to really consider here is how much stock these teams put into the combine. I am really an advocate of what do you put on tape, not necessarily on the combine. It's great that you can lift 3 refrigerators. I'm really happy for you that you're really, really fast running in a straight line. However, guys like, hopefully, fingers crossed, Troy Polamalu, a potential Hall of Famer, didn't really excel in the combine. He was a guy that you saw the tape on him, and he was a splash guy. He is a one-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation talent that came out, and now it's all down to analytics. How fast did they run the 40? How fast, how many times can they bench press 225 pounds? How high can they jump? That's great if you're going into the Olympics, but these guys are playing football. And when you look at...
And everybody's good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And being at YSN will tell you, we have a great group here in Northeast Ohio of athletes, student athletes, from the youth organizations all the way up to college sports. And then you have those really special ones that go on to the next level. And as any parent should know by this point, it's one of those scenarios where each level gets a little bit tougher and the cream gets a little bit less, I guess, more condensed. There's not as much out there, and you start seeing this is a special talent here, 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 here. The Browns need to realize at some point that they need to watch film on these guys instead of just what are they going to do in the combine. I thought John Dorsey was the guy that was a football-first guy, worried more about what their intangibles were and if they were football character people in an organization. He did great things, moving the needle for Cleveland and getting them the pieces that they needed, that Ferrari that you talked about, and the Browns didn't do anything with it.
And I think just briefly, DJ, I know we got other stuff we want to talk about, but 2 things quickly on, you mentioned so much focus on the combine now and not enough of just whether a guy could play and looking at the film. I think RG3 is a perfect example of someone whose draft stock skyrocketed because of his combine numbers. And
Jamarcus Russell?
They looked at his 40 time. Jamarcus Russell. I remember Mel Kiper just glowing about how far he could throw the football from his knees, but he didn't have it upstairs.
And that's the thing.
He just didn't have that football IQ.
Have you ever seen the clip about Mel Kiper getting into it with the GM from the Colts and going? I think it was the Colts. Them going crazy. What is Mel Kiper going to tell me about football? But now that Mel Kiper has put all these analytics together and said, hey, this is who you should draft. This is what this team needs. I think he's really I think there's more stock put into those draft boards than people realize at the professional level. And, I think owners especially buy into that stuff because they don't have the time or resources necessary to attend all these meetings that they should go. And there's some owners, Jerry Jones, that have a little bit more power than others and trying to steer the ship from the back of the boat, so to speak. So it's interesting that how the combine and how analytics has come into football, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, the numbers will just continue to get deeper and deeper and deeper as the game evolves. But my question is football a real game of analytics that you can draft your team and base your team just on numbers on paper? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And I'll say this, and it will kind of lead us into our next topic of discussion. But just a couple things in closing on this, DJ. If you look at you mentioning John Dorsey, I think it was pretty, just absolutely outrageous that people had said the Browns go to the Super Bowl before this season because they were coming off a season where they only won 7 games, and they hadn't won a game in over 2 years before that Jets game in Mayfield's first season. So I think what he did, considering where the Browns' cupboard was, the cupboard was totally bare when he took over. They were by far the worst team in the NFL, had no talent. And you look at what he did there, I thought he was a very good GM. And frankly, I think he should still be employed by the Browns, but nothing you could do about it now. But you brought up Baker, and that kind of leads me. I think it's gonna lead the charge into our next discussion. I know you think, DJ, that he kind of got figured out in year number 2. I thought Lamar Jackson got figured out in year number 1. Then he goes on to have a sensational regular season. But once again, at home in the playoffs, they get down early. They drop some passes. They look a little out of sync, out of rhythm. You get a lead on Baltimore, force Lamar Jackson to have to throw more, and the Ravens were a mess. So with that being said, we'll get into the conference championships, who we think's going to win. But what did you think? How surprised were you about how handily the Titans beat Lamar Jackson? And what do you think of his future? Because it seems like many people have put him in the Hall of Fame already.
Yeah, and I think that I was part of that crowd that saw the San Diego game last year and said, this dude's done. That's it. They figured him out. They got him licked. Lamar Jackson is going to be the RG3 of this decade. And then he has this year. And if you are able to, there's a difference between watching games on television and watching games in real life. That guy it's almost like he knows where the defenders are going to be before they get there. And I don't know if that's just a natural ability, if that's just his vision, but if you watch the way he runs, it's literally like watching a video game. And, he's putting up video game numbers. If you watch the spin moves that he does, the jukes, just the way that his body moves and how quickly he can start and how quickly he can stop. This is why I had such a tough time with so many teams passing on Lamar Jackson when he got drafted. I really thought that the Steelers, I'll tell you that the Steelers should draft Joe Burrow and they should draft Lamar Jackson. They should draft everybody. But the reality was I thought, man, this is a more polished Cordell Stewart. And Cordell was the guy, in my opinion, that started this revolution that kind of faded away, and then it came back. And now it's here, and now everybody's trying to go out and get their own Lamar Jackson. However, defenses in the NFL are faster, stronger, and if you put all your eggs in the Lamar Jackson basket, he is one hamstring away. He is one wrong turn away, one hit away from crumbling your organization down to its absolute foundation. And that's why I think that the pocket passer, maybe a little bit of mobility, like early days of Roethlisberger, a Joe Burrow, who I'm so high on right now, even Tom Brady, when you look at it, he brings added dimensions to his game, because if it's 4th and 1, Brady's going to duck his head in there and he's going to be able to move it. I think that it's a fad. I think that Lamar Jackson, although he will win MVP this year, will be maybe in his career a 2-time MVP candidate. I think that guys like Patrick Mahomes are probably more of the future in the mold that NFL GMs should be looking for. Not so much, maybe, Aaron Rodgers is a good quarterback too. Jimmy G still has to prove himself in my eyes. But you want somebody that can rely on their arm down the stretch. If you got to move the ball 95 yards, you're not going to rely on somebody that can, maybe get you 20 yards a pop running the ball, because all it takes is one Vontez Burfict to knock out Lamar Jackson, and your whole game plan changes. And then what do you do with analytics?
And I used to, up until really this year, when I watched more and more of Jackson DJ, I'm like, well, the one thing that's, one of the biggest truths that I know in football is you can't teach like accuracy. Either you have it or you don't. But I was surprised, DJ. I thought Lamar Jackson, they said he worked on his passing like crazy in the offseason, and even though he had a horrible game in this playoff game, I thought some of his passes were really on point, whereas Mayfield, his rookie year, was incredibly accurate,
Yep.
and then this year was throwing a lot of balls high. He was putting too much mustard on balls that should have been lobs, and then the short passes,
Touch passes,
he wasn't able to throw them. So I mean, what do you think? Do you feel like Lamar is a guy that, he's maybe peaked as far as his passing ability?
I don't think he's peaked. I actually think that he can get a lot better. But realistically, is these defenses, just like they saw Baker Mayfield here in the second year, they were able to figure things out. Once you put tape of yourself out there, it's tough to take it back. And certain players are only so dynamic, and Lamar Jackson brings a lot to the table. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, he still has to, get things done. He's still got to be able to either run or pass. And as we saw on, was that Saturday night? If you take away, have Lamar Jackson have to throw the ball at home, everything's perfect for him condition-wise. It's just the postseason's a different animal. I mean, you can have all the regular season accolades in the world, Dan Marino, but you never win a Super Bowl or a big game, I guess we should call it here because of copyright infringement. But it's one of those things where, listen, are you going to stack MVP trophies and let them collect dust while other Tom Brady's are winning Super Bowls, Peyton Manning's winning Super Bowls, Ben Roethlisberger's winning Super Bowls? I'd rather my quarterback and my team win Super Bowls. That's just me, though. But if people are high on Lamar Jackson, and this is how it's changed so much over the years, is people are not as invested in teams anymore as they're invested in brands of players. So you look at LeBron James. People follow LeBron James wherever he goes. They don't necessarily are lifelong Cavs fans like yourself. Like, I've got a LeBron James Heat jersey. I have a LeBron James Los Angeles Lakers jersey. I've got a Shaquille O'Neal Magic jersey. I've got a Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, I feel like I'm one of the founding fathers of that group that just follows players around because you like the player as opposed to necessarily liking the team so much.
Do you feel like you're that way in a lot of ways with, like, were you as big on the Steelers before the Big Ben era?
Yeah, I was huge on the Steelers.
Okay.
But like basketball, I'm not a huge NBA basketball fan, but I was huge into LeBron James because he was around here, right?
Yeah.
I was drinking the Cleveland Kool-Aid for as long as it took, and then when he jetted to South Beach, I was not playing with him. I was ready to go. Like, it was one of those things, like, I'm following this guy. And you're seeing more and more of that now more than ever. Players are brands. They're marketable. If we see, which we're probably going to get to next, if we see a Super Bowl that is Kansas City and Green Bay, it's the State Farm Bowl because both players, top players on their team are represented by State Farm. So, I mean, is it more along the lines for me Jackson's got more fans because he's Lamar Jackson and he's successful, because success breeds success and people will follow that. Baker Mayfield isn't necessarily as popular this year because he didn't have a successful year. He's not the hype guy. ESPN's not following him around as much as they used to because he wasn't the top story. So it's interesting to me. I think, again, to wrap this conversation, Scotty, there's going to be tape on Lamar Jackson. Teams are going to figure him out because he's only so dynamic, even though he is one of the more dynamic players of our generation. But I think that once they figure him out, I don't think he has the wherewithal mentally to increase his game to be a different player.
I think it's something as we watch. It's gonna be fascinating. That answers a question I was gonna ask you about whether or not you think Patty Mahomes or Jackson at this point has more of the upside. So you're more of a Pat Mahomes. He's shown his ability to run and be effective scrambling and running, but he also can make those ridiculous throws when he's not even looking and go the sidearm, and has a very powerful arm, and he's not a guy that, I think Lamar Jackson's game is based on, even if he's not dropping back and then taking off every play, that offensive system is best suited for his running skills, where I think a guy like Pat Mahomes in Kansas City, he can run if a play breaks down, but he's not just going to be taking off. Not to say that Lamar doesn't go over all of his reads, but I think that system, even with the other personnel like Mark Ingram, it was so run-based. That's why you get a lead on Baltimore, everything changes because that system isn't as effective.
Absolutely.
So what were your thoughts? I kind of thought it was like the Warriors, DJ, this past weekend with the Kansas City Chiefs, down 24-0 in the blink of an eye, and then bam, just like that, it's an avalanche. Do you think it was more of a case where the Chiefs won that game, or the Texans and Coach Bill O'Brien lost it?
I think the defensive line just cashed it in. I mean, they're up 24, and the Texans' defensive line just said, "You know what? We got this one in the bag. We did our job," and I think they underestimated Pat Mahomes. And again, there's a lot of quarterbacks, there's a lot of players in this league that probably would have just mailed it in the rest of the way, down 24. But I think a loss last year educated the Chiefs in more ways than one. And they finally stood tall and said, we're not going to let this happen again. I mean, if you look at it, it wasn't Mahomes' fault that they were down 24. It really wasn't.
No, because they had the block punt, they had the muff punt by Tyreek Hill that led to two touchdowns.
And I will speak for Watson and say it's not his fault that they lost. That was on the defense. He spotted 24 points to his defense and said, "Hey, we're ready to play. We're going to win this game. We want to be here. We want to play in the AFC Championship." And the defense pooped down their leg, and they basically said at the end of the day that, we're content with 24 points. Nobody's going to score 25 on us at this point. And then the Chiefs said, "You're right. We'll score 51." And Mahomes went bonkers. I mean, just the unbelievable. He had nothing to lose at that point. When you're down 24, just sling it all over the yard like you're playing in the back streets. That had to be fun for him. That had to be fun, and it was fun to watch. I sent a message over to my buddy Anthony, who's a huge Chiefs fan, and I said, "Uh-oh," and I think it was about 45 minutes later, he said, "Uh-oh," and I turned the game back on, and I was like, "Holy cow, this is unbelievable!" So exciting games. Exciting games.
Yeah, and they actually, I don't know if you read, DJ, but the Chiefs actually ran out of fireworks
Oh, jeez.
for celebrations of touchdowns because they scored so many points in that game.
That's a good problem to have.
I want to get to what you think about the Final Four now in the pros, but quickly before I do that, did you see the Texans, their fake punt that they try? What do you think of that call? Because I thought personally O'Brien, he was conservative when he should have been more aggressive, and at times he was too aggressive when he should have been more conservative and bleeding the clock to try to keep it away from home. So what you think about that? It's one of those things where if they get it, they say he's a genius. If you don't, you're an idiot. But what were your thoughts?
I mean, it's interesting because in the world of Madden that we live in nowadays, no fan wants to see their team punt it away. They want to see him go for it. If it's 4th and 50, they still want to see him go for it. I think that fans can't be too hard on Bill O'Brien because I think in their heart of hearts, like you said, if he gets that right there, the excitement is all about it. And Bill O'Brien's a genius. But he didn't, and now he's the GOAT, right? He's the scapegoat, not the real GOAT. But reality is I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have had the stones to do it. Up what you were up. Were they up 24 at that point?
It was at that point it was 24-7.
24-7.
So they were up 7.
So it's one of those things where he was trying to take the momentum and shift it back into the favor of Houston. Just didn't work. And, do you go for that? Maybe that's a decision that he'll have to live with the rest of his life. But, again, if he gets it, we might be talking about the Texans going to the AFC Championship. So fans can't have it both ways. You can't criticize that he's not aggressive enough, and then when he becomes aggressive, you can't say that he should be more conservative.
And that leads us in very good take there, and it leads us to what I want to get into now in these conference title games, DJ. And I just wanted to know, you look at it as far as the teams we got Green Bay, we got San Francisco, we got Tennessee, and we got Kansas City, and we have Ryan Tannehill, who didn't start the season as quarterback for Tennessee. We got Rodgers, who a lot of people have thought he's been the best quarterback in the league for a while. You have Rodgers, you have Mahomes, who had just that remarkable rookie year and has continued to do great things this year. And you have also Jimmy Garoppolo. So I wanted to know, DJ, when the Steelers are out of it, has there ever been a team, like a second team for you that you kind of follow? And do you have, is it more at this point, do you have a team you're pulling for, or do you just want to see good games?
I just want to see good games. I've been the kiss of death, seemingly, this year for football teams. So I tried to stay away from it. I said that it was going to be the Saints and the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and with two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time doing battle, and that obviously didn't work. But for me, I kind of always root for the 49ers, one of those secret fans, just because they're local here. Before I was a quote-unquote Steelers fan, like I am now, I was a 49ers guy because I have family in San Francisco, and Joe Montana, Joe Cool was probably the most fun to watch. I mean, that was football now with the West Coast offense before we knew football existed with these unbelievably passing attacks and things of that nature. So if I'm rooting for anybody, I'm probably rooting for the Niners. But part of me, I went to Westminster. I'm a Titan for life. Part of me is loving this Titan run, and I love Vrabel. I think he's awesome. I think he's the next generation of great football coaching here in the National Football League.
And you look at them, they're kind of, because of the way defenses are so geared up for the pass now, DJ. It's funny how the pendulum seems to swing. Like, they're going back to more the old school style football. Oh, let's give it to our halfback, have the great running game, and rely on our defense. Ryan Tannehill hasn't really even had to throw that much because Derrick Henry has 180 yards plus these last 3 games. So it's really kind of like a throwback style. The 49ers in Kyle Shanahan's zone blocking scheme, they run the ball a lot too. So you feel like running backs being like a focal point of the offense, that's coming back a little bit here. Do you think it'll be chalk though? Most people are going with Frisco and KC, but the Titans, I'll tell you something, DJ. If they end up winning this Super Bowl and they beat Tom Brady at New England, they beat the guy that's going to be the league MVP and the best team in football at that time in the Ravens at Baltimore. They win at Kansas City and then win the Super Bowl. I think that's arguably the best run in postseason history. But what do you think about these conference championship games?
I think that my heart wants to see San Francisco and Kansas City. But my head tells me that we're going to see Green Bay and the Chiefs because it's the 100th year of the NFL. This is an opportunity for them to relive the first Super Bowls. And I think it's just it's an easy kind of cinching the ribbon on essentially what they're trying to do. They've made it. I mean, it should be. It's the 100th year of the National Football League, and you make a big deal out of it. So take it for what it's worth. But man, if I could see the Niners play, even though I don't necessarily want them to win because that'll put 3 teams with 6 Super Bowls. But I mean, their defense is just outstanding, and it's fun to watch good defense. But at the end of the day, if I could see the Titans win too, I'd be okay with that.
As far as I go, I like to see Tennessee just because they've kind of taken that underdog role. The Packers and 49ers both have won so many Super Bowls. It's been a long time coming for the Chiefs, but I also feel like they're going to be in it year in and year out with Mahomes and Reed. I feel like they're not going to go away anytime soon. You said you like the Packers in the Chiefs, which is a bit surprising to me as far as your Packer pick goes. Do you think because Aaron Rodgers has a lot more experience and Jimmy G is so young, is that why you give the Packers the edge there?
I think there's a lot of different kind of pieces to this puzzle, and I've never been an Aaron Rodgers fan. I like the discount double check that he does, but beyond that, I think he's been.
Plus they, sorry to cut you off,
yeah.
But they crushed you they crushed your dreams of a Super Bowl. Mike Tomlin's second go around, so I can see why you don't like Rodgers.
You like throwing that salt on the wound a little bit, don't you?
I mean,
with all those Super Bowls that you watch with the Browns in, I'm sure that running the tape back on that makes you a little bit salty.
Hey, we may not have a Super Bowl, but we have 8 NFL championships.
I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Sorry about that. Because those count. Because they talk about world championships all the time on ESPN. Aaron Rodgers, to me, I just don't think he's as great. And they'll tell you that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have the pieces. Well, he's got the pieces this year. He's got a great running back. He's got some great receivers. He's got a good defense. So I just think that the experience that Rodgers has had makes his heartbeat a little bit slower in situations like this. But again, I'm rooting for Jimmy G. I'm rooting for Bosa. I'm rooting for the great defense that sits out there and what they've had to endure. And then that Super Bowl where they lost to the Ravens, in the blackout. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has to go the Niners' way. That's why my head tells me that the Packers are going to win. But, man, it'd be sweet to see San Francisco in another Super Bowl. I think that'd be good. But for the NFL, the ratings probably around Rodgers.
See, I just think that San Francisco defense is just so good. I think they'll get after Aaron Rodgers and make it really tough on him. And I feel like Kyle Shanahan on the other side, I feel like Shanahan, he's arguably he's one of the best young coaches in the NFL. A lot of people jumped on the Sean McVay genius bandwagon with the Rams, but I feel like you could make a case that Kyle Shanahan's just as good, if not better, and that pains me because that's another guy that left Cleveland.
The one that got away
because of the incompetence of the front office. But I just feel like San Francisco's D is just better than the Packers, even though the Packers have a decent defense. I think San Francisco is better in just about every area. And when Jimmy G's had to throw, he's done pretty well for the most part. Yes, he's made some mistakes, but when he's had to throw, he's done a good job. I like the 49ers to win in that one. As far as the Chiefs and Titans go, I think the Titans do have a shot to beat Kansas City, DJ, but I think Ryan Tannehill's going to have to do a little bit more than he's done in the first couple games. I don't know if Derrick Henry, even with the Chiefs' defense being suspect against the run at times this year, I don't know if Derrick Henry could do it 3 times in a row with a focal point on stopping him. So I feel like Tannehill and those receivers are going to have to do a little bit more. I give the Chiefs the edge there, but wouldn't be surprised in the least if the Titans won. So you're going Chiefs in the AFC, but what percentage chance do you give the Titans to?
Oh, I think it's 50-50. I think it's absolutely 50-50. This is one where you're going to have to call heads or tails, but because I think that the Chiefs showed a lot of vulnerability on their defense by giving up 24 straight points to the Texans, who are not the Titans at this point. Titans are red hot. So it'll be interesting. I think it's a coin flip on the AFC, and I think it's a coin flip in the NFC, so it'll be fun.
And final thing I have for you, DJ.
Yes, sir.
Browns fans, one thing before we do move on to our last topic, it was one thing that Browns fans kind of hung their hat on. They would say, Nick Chubb's arguably the best back in the league, and I think he's up there. But with what Hendry has done has been sensational for Tennessee. You also got a lot of people are going to throw Christian McCaffrey out there. But with the shelf life of a running back so short because of the hits they take and so much of an emphasis on the passing game, if you're the Titans, we saw it with Dallas, and that didn't work out so well. If you're the Titans, do you give Derrick Henry a big payday?
You have to. I mean, he's proved himself as the best back in the league, at least for this year. I mean, so why wouldn't you pay him? And he's doing big things, and he's, what is this, the 4th, 5th year in the NFL, something like that. So you got to pay the man. Somebody's going to pay the man, so you might as well be you, right? Unless you have a backup plan. And right now, you look at that Titans roster. There's not much of a backup plan.
No, there isn't there. So what do you? I keep saying last thing. I'm sorry. I'm really excited today, DJ.
Good.
This being our first time for this podcast. But how do you feel like as far as scores go? Do you think these games will be high scoring, low scoring?
I don't know. That is, again, another toss-up, and I hate sitting on the fence on this. I would think that the Chiefs game is going to be high scoring, and I think that I'll just say they'll both be high scoring. These are some good offenses, but the better defenses. I would say Packers win 31-27, and I'm going to take the Chiefs 48-38.
Okay. I like that. A lot of points that would please everybody playing fantasy football.
Well, if they're playing right now, goodness gracious. They my fantasy wrapped up week 17.
Yeah, they wouldn't be playing.
It'd be the daily
right
fantasy.
Now, but it's like offensive fireworks. I think that's what makes fantasy so popular in the league. Wants to see a lot of points. I think we could see a lot of points. I think the Titans-Chiefs game, a lot better chance. That's more high scoring than the Packers-Niners, if I had to
I would
pick.
agree with that.
The last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, DJ, was the Houston Astros in Major League Baseball. And I know that in some ways, cheating has been a part of sports for years, and there's the old adage, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Right.
And so many people want to talk about the integrity of the game and this and that. And I get that, and people have made valid points. But you're always trying to get an edge in sports. Everybody's always trying to get that edge. But with that being said, DJ, this is pretty bad in my opinion. I mean, the fact that they knew what pitches were coming. I know it's got to be hard for you because you're a Pirates fan and you've just seen losing season after losing season with a couple of, good regular seasons and early playoff exits sprinkled in there. But as an Indians fan, especially looking at the 2018 series when the Astros swept the Indians, it's something that it does, hurt thinking about it. I don't really feel bad for anybody involved with the Astros. I don't have, any sort of kind of rooting interest there. I've never really, been big on the Astros because I was born here.
Right.
But what are your thoughts as a outsider being again a Pirates fan? What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I think it's interesting, that everybody seems to point the finger. And I don't know if it's just because we live here, but Cleveland fans tend to be the worst people to point fingers between them and Ohio State fans. It's never their fault, and nobody ever has been victimized as much as Cleveland fans and Ohio State fans. And how many times, this is off topic, how many times did I have to hear on social media or people blowing up my phone about how Ohio State should be in the national championship game? No, you shouldn't. You didn't win the game. So, and don't blame it on the refs. Score in the red zone. Nobody's cheating you. And the whole Astros cheating situation, you look at that, how is that any different than, was it Jason Grimsley crawling through the vents of Jacobs Field trying to fish out Albert Bell's bat that was loaded? I mean, if we're calling people out for cheating, everybody does it. At the end of the day, everybody does it. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. So you can be sore about 2018 and being swept in the playoffs, but what about those other teams back in the day? Was it I forget, was it the Brewers or somebody like that they were going up against, and Bell was using a loaded bat? It's a scenario, and it's all true because he came out and said it. It was one of the pitchers crawled through the vents, picked up the bat from the umpire's room that was in question, replaced it with an absolutely legit bat, but it was cheating. So if we're pointing the finger at people that are cheating, we got to make sure that, like my mom used to tell me, when you point one finger at somebody, there's 4 fingers pointing back at you. So make sure that we realize that you have an absolute clean slate if you're pointing and saying, hey, shame on you for cheating, because that's not what we do. It's garbage. Everybody tries to get competitive advantages. That's what it is. Did the Astros go above and beyond? Probably. Are they going to change the game? Probably. But here's my issue with the Major League Baseball. You've got a guy the all-time greatest hitter in all of baseball history, who you still are keeping out of the Hall of Fame for something he didn't do when he was a player. And now you're going to shake and wag your finger at the Astros and say you can't do that, but these guys get to continue to coach and continue to play. I know it's a year-long suspension, but Coro is out now in Boston. Hinch and the general manager are out in Houston. There's more to come from this, and they're going to finally figure. I mean, do you take away Jose Altuve's MVP? Do you take away the championship from? I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
As far as that goes, I don't think you could take away it.
Why?
I mean, what purpose does that? Like, everybody watched the game.
Oh, I know that.
They saw the Astros.
Yep.
Win I don't think that really does anything. And I know, DJ, it might sound like I was contradicting myself when I say, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And then I say, this is, I do think it's a little bit, I agree with you about the hypocrisy in baseball. And I've said for years that Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And it's ridiculous that he's not. But I do think it was a little bit excessive there. But again, you look at the entire steroid era, everybody was cheating.
Nailed it.
Baseball didn't care because there was more home runs, and then
more
the
ticket
attendance
sales
was through the roof.
TV contracts
were ratings through the roof. So people just
can't have it both ways.
Did not care.
That's the problem, Scotty, is Major League Baseball wants to sit there and say that they're doing everything by the book. The NFL wants to sit and say they're doing everything by the book. Their best interest is in the integrity of the game. How many times have the Patriots been caught red-handed taping sidelines, taping practices, taping? I mean, this is what Major League Baseball is doing is the right thing to do because they got caught red-handed. Major League Baseball did not come out and say, hey, we caught the Astros cheating. If you remember correctly, it was other teams coming out. It was news sources coming out saying, hey, we think something's up in Houston. And
other players and former Astro players.
It was the Cincinnati Bengals staff that said, hey, why are you taping the sidelines to the Patriots? What the Major League Baseball is doing right now as their slap on the wrist, if you will, is what the NFL should be doing to the Patriots the entire time. Deflategate. You look at the Spygate. You look at everything that they've done. You nip it in the bud before it ever gets going, because now they've got a problem. Now they've got a huge problem that they've set the precedent. So if one of the other 31 teams goes and does the same thing, they better just lose a 7th-round draft pick or whatever it ends up being, because that's what the Patriots lost.
Yeah.
You don't have to have – I mean, really, whether Belichick had something to do with it or not, he should not be coaching the Patriots anymore. This is the second offense. They should know better.
Yeah, it's and it's something. I think, again, DJ, you could look at many things. You could look at somebody, testing positive for a banned substance, like NFL. Just say somebody, smoking marijuana,
Right.
testing positive for it, and they get, they get suspended X amount of games, but then Ray Rice hits his girlfriend, and it was nothing until the NFL acted, and did nothing until the TMZ video
Correct.
came out, like way later, and they already had knowledge of it, and then they go and they change
wag their
things,
finger. Yep.
and they say it's all about the integrity. So
And that's it.
I completely agree with you there. I mean, we know that's total BS,
Yep.
DJ. Come on.
I know. That's we're about 10 minutes over, Scotty. We got some free podcast going on right now.
Yeah, I had a blast, DJ. It was a lot of fun, and just so you know, for future shows, if I'm ever talking too long, just say, "Hey, shut up." I feel like I can get carried away and not let the other person
You're having fun.
give their point, but it's been a blast, man.
We're excited. That's episode 1 in the books. Scotty, thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, see you next week.